27th, 2026 MSD of Wayne Township Board of Education working session is called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Mrs. O'Day Marcotte, the roll call.
Absolutely. Brandon Bowman.
Present.
Susan Graves. Present. Karen Burke. Present. Michael Gordon.
Present.
Tamika Graham. Present. Ben Wakefield.
Present.
And I'm Terry O'Day Marcotte. We are all present.
Thank you. Board, you have a copy of the agenda for this evening's meeting. You have a motion to adopt the agenda presented.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Thank you, board. Dr. Suggs, do you have anyone signing for public comment?
Don't believe we do. Mr. President, I'm so sorry. I was writing down who's here and who's not. Who made the motion to accept the agenda and who seconded? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Move into new business. We have board policies, first readings. Mr. Fessler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, the first policy ready for first reading tonight is A-175, firearms, weapons, and disruptive devices. This policy is going to define what firearm, weapons, and knives are under Indiana code. The update also prohibits possession of imitation firearms, which is something we asked for last spring. The update also prohibits the possession of imitation firearms.
Yeah, I remember we had a slew of, and I had to send something out to parents just saying this is. So, yeah.
Also, the update moves to the section that outlines the exception to the policy that a person can have a firearm on our grounds if the firearm is in the trunk or glove compartment of a locked vehicle or stored out of plain sight. The exception does not extend to students unless the student is a member of a shooting sports team and the principal has given approval. So at Ben Davis, our team, their drill rifles are simulations. They can't even be loaded with any type of ammunition or blanks. Cadets have to check those out and they have to sign them out via a logbook that tracks who signed out that rifle. And they're tracked by serial number, required to keep them in their case until they use them for practice, and can only be transported in cars and not stored. So they can't even leave them in their car to take them into the building that day. Even though the rifles are not real, they're required to treat them as if they're real. And when they're away from school, the cadets are told to practice somewhere that's out of sight, so no one can mistake them for having a real firearm. And if one of the cadets violates any of those checkout rules, they're not allowed to check out a rifle until they receive remedial training. Happy to answer any questions you might have concerning school board policy A-175.
Mr. Fessler, just point of clarification, the exception for having a firearm locked in a trunk or concealed in a glove box, that is just in sync with state and federal guidelines, right? Right.
I can remember once, I should recall, we had one employee that we had to terminate because they wouldn't follow that.
Questions? We'll move on. Thank you, Mr. President. Moving to the board, the next policy for first reading is C-225, student due process. This policy has been updated so it matches our practice and our historical practice and our administrative guidelines. It also removes the 10-day guideline to consider an appeal. You can continue to see appeals in writing. However, considering an appeal is not required by statute, you can choose not to hear it. In that case, the student's family can appeal directly to the circuit court in the county. I'd like to answer any questions you may have regarding this policy, but also give you some time to discuss how you'd like to proceed.
Here the choices are, do you want to continue to, much like we did this last case where the information is submitted to you and you consider it, or you can just bypass that accept what the, examiner and the results of that, and if the parent student wants to fight that, then they can do that with the judge. Which that's what happened with this last case anyway, which the judge upheld the decision. Discussion.
There are choices, 1 and 2.
And I mentioned the 10 days are waived, now it says holding a meeting in a reasonable amount of time. Restricted to 10 days if you do want to receive the written.
Right,
If
if you're
it's online with the meeting.
Or- But
We've not been given any explicit guidance from Churchill and Antrim. But what's becoming commonplace across the state is for boards to opt for the second option where parents would appeal with a judge. And that is coming from the advice of school attorneys, just because it can be quite costly to have an attorney present through those conversations, moderations, and updates. So I think across the state, we are seeing a lot of boards transition to removing themselves from that interaction with students and families and just letting the expulsion examiner, the family, and the courts.
What are those similar to us? So we say across the state, there's still quite a few districts that don't mirror us. So what's happening kind of either, donut.
the donuts, I think we learned mostly they
They're saying, yeah.
yeah, boards don't deal with it because the examiner has done that work already.
Does it hold more work if it does come before the board also, so that there's more people saying we agree with this, we agree with this?
That's hard to say. That's hard to say. I wouldn't know. And because more folks do it that way, we really don't have the data. But
Here's my only, not sure how to word what I'm gonna say, so try to spit it out, and maybe it won't come out in the right words, but, my only concern is that as a voted staff, a voted team here, it doesn't happen often enough, obviously. You said this is only the second time in your time frame. I feel like it's almost our obligation to see it through the process. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I almost feel like it's part of what we do and what we signed up for to, at some point, I think the community is going to say, hey, what happened with this? And, as a board, we're going to say, well, we don't know, we washed our hands of it. And I struggle with that.
Give us the option, we may have a hearing, but we also may not. Is that correct?
that is correct.
It gives
That's
us
how
the
it
authority
reads. Yeah.
to do it or not to do it. So, yeah, well, I mean, if that's what that says, I would say, why vote away the potential authority that we might be necessary in the future when we can also at the same time say, no, we want to save some money, there's no point in us doing it.
Well, see, I think the opposite, because if we go with that way, it's gonna be explaining why we decided to hear this one, decided not to hear that one.
You gotta explain everyone.
And so I would rather say we have nothing to do with it and let it be, because they still get to appeal. We're not taking away your option to appeal. You just do it, and I think that eliminates if there's ever an instance where any of us are very closely with anything or connected, because that could always take place that we personally know someone that's involved. I'd rather say appeal and it goes to the court.
Does the appeal process through the courts cost money?
Yeah, I mean, our attorney represents us.
Mhm.
No, I mean for the parent.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so are we giving that, we taking away some of that access and saying you have to have money to be able to do that when through us, they would not, I guess they would have.
Everyone that comes.
That's what it does.
Which, that is a whole
That'd be
other
my
conversation.
The whole
I,
access would be.
yeah.
The update from,
Kids could still have that.
the update does say that the board will hold a meeting. Oh, not.
Yeah.
Not being-
If requested. Right.
Yeah, but it's back on the student parent.
And the student or parent they may choose, I mean, they may not choose to include us, but if they want to include us, I think that option,
Well, they
to
have
me,
the
I think that option needs to be
Yeah.
there.
But once they do, the board does.
This puts us in a really, gray area. Most expulsion matters are going to be legal issues.
That's true.
And the board's inflection on a legal issue then in my observation, takes it away from being a factual legal matter to being objective. That the board would have an opportunity to inflect an opinion on whether we should or should not uphold an expulsion, which again, in most cases is a legal matter. But it's, I think I think there's good intention and good merit in having a board hear an expulsion appeal. I also think, there's very little evidence of any expulsion ever being overturned as a result of a board appeal because it's already made it through an expulsion examiner who's verified things.
Wasn't it explained in our meeting that our job and our only role in that was just to make sure the process was followed and not whether the law was followed?
No, the examiner verified the process was followed and the law was followed. Our role is to determine,
If we agree with.
yes, we agree this child is expelled for 1 calendar year, or we recommend a modified punishment.
My only hesitation was about access, and you're right, they're typically, families have attorneys, whether they're coming to, to us or to the judge, so that was my only hesitation, so if we think that that's not going to stop.
We have so few, the ones I've been involved in my whole career here, they've always had.
There is almost always a pathway to continue education rather than stopping services completely. It's typically an alternative placement, an alternative means to an education, or an alternative pathway.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Even in the latest case, his education never stopped. Even through the expulsion, it still won't. Still have access to an education.
I really can see parents requesting it to go to the board.
Oh,
to review.
Mhm.
Say thank you.
In hopes that it's gonna be changed,
Yeah.
right? That's the point.
I personally like the way you did it. The more that we know and that parents know that they can, request a hearing. We learned a lot.
Mhm.
Dr. Walters, typically these are gonna come through your office long before they make it to us. Do you have any insight?
Certainly, I think overall you touched on a lot of things. We are becoming an increasingly litigious society. So we're definitely seeing an uptick in that. I think one of the trusting positions that I would throw out in part of this conversation, the desire to be transparent, open, and accessible from a parent, I 100% agree with. I think ultimately that may put the board in a position of disagreeing with the process through which the school administrators carried that recommendation from start to finish. And I think that what I would potentially weigh is that transparency and that accessibility against really trust in the process that through an expulsion examiner's third party, that's the layer where the school would be called to question if a mistake has been made. And that expulsion examiner in that particular moment has the authority to say that a mistake has been made or due process has not been followed, and overturn it at that level. I think that's a difficult position for the board to be in, because on one hand, you have the process of the school that's been carried through a third party that has said, in fact, this is an expellable offense and due process has been followed. So what that consideration might look like. Way against the acceptability of the.
And that was my struggle with this last one. I was conflicted. Which I wish I had, then it was kind of like, okay, I don't want to be, you know, involved in this part, just because I felt I started to question a lot of things where I'd rather be hands off. That's just me.
It is a matter of law. A legal matter.
Is that third party examiner, always utilized in all expulsions or just when it gets to this level of? pushing?
It's when they appeal, right? Only when they appeal.
Okay. So if there's an appeal, then is there a policy or, something in place where the board would always be informed in what the finding is? Wait, maybe they're not involved in the appeal process, but like this last time we were, because we are involved, we were given all the information. Would the board still be informed on that if we give up that right of appeal in those
So
circumstances?
there's no policy, but certainly, I would make you aware of a situation if it goes to the examiner. In this case, it happened really quickly. We had no idea that they were gonna, do all the things, and it happened really fast. So, but you would be made aware if there's an expulsion, of course. That would be our practice.
I think that would be a good practice. I think after listening to Mika and Brandon that, yeah, if we don't need to be involved in, the only reason we would want to turn over is something terrible happened along the way. And, that would still put us in a bad situation. But I think if some terrible things are happening, we would want to know in every circumstance what's happening in these appeal process.
Oh, yeah.
So that future board, not worried about us, but future boards and future leadership is held accountable along the way. Make sure that all these things are happening. We spotted, we talked about some things like timelines and maybe some things that happened in this last place that maybe were not as tight as needed to be. And so I think you recognize that. I think everybody here at this table recognized that and was working on that right away. But yeah, just making sure the board's informed, especially in the future, so that there is that layer of accountability, I think is helpful. But they probably don't need to make a decision on that. It's all legal matter. If we reverse it, just like this, if we reverse that decision, we're saying it's okay to have a gun on campus, right? Like that's, I don't know, but that's a scary thing.
Mr. President, are we deciding if we're going one or two?
We need to issue guidance on the policy Mr. Fessler should pursue.
Then he'll come back
With the second reading.
the second reading and the next
Or
one.
protocol.
Some more information about how many other school districts have changed it to that way before we get it.
Oh, that's not a problem.
Especially school districts more similar to Wayne, for instance, Pike, Decatur, Warren,
All the
Lawrence's,
donut.
yeah, the Indianapolis schools, and maybe even the Avon and Brownsburg type schools that are close.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily worried about Crown Point or something like that, but
And as soon as you have it, you gather it.
That's fine.
Mhm.
Right, let's go to C575, school wellness. A couple of additions to the policy that came from guidance of the U.S. Department of Health. The first assures that child nutrition department is receiving annual training in accordance with USDA professional standards. And our child nutrition administrators provide this training once a year. Second edition adds fundraisers during the school day, the smart snack guidelines, which is already happening. On the last edition, USDA guidance assures that drinking water is available throughout the day. That is drinking fountains count. One other area to note is under the evaluation section. We use the evaluation tool as a wellness policy and action tool developed by the CDC, Center for Prevention. And that's what we use to evaluate the policy every 3 years. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have concerning school board policy C-575.
3.1, it says the superintendent shall appoint a council consisting of at least one representative from each of those groups. Who is the board member?
That, Mr. Fessler, do you,
And Mr. Joyner will be invited.
It was actually
I
me.
think it was Mr. Vogt.
okay,
That will be up this year.
this year, I need a member.
To do it again.
Now, fundraisers held during the day, I read that. Is that like if you're doing like a Valentine's Day, you can buy a sucker for your sweetheart or whatever?
You can buy soccer though, if it doesn't meet the guidelines.
And you have to pay a certain fee.
Or Sminsel. And might find. Yeah, so that day, buy a Sminsel. Feel. Thank you, President. Members of the board, our next policy, the first reading is F-100 budget adoption and implementation. The changes in this policy were requested by the Distress Units Appeal Board and recommended for every district, even if that district is not involved with web. And Mr. Samuel, we have a chance to look this over for accuracy. It is within our practices and what you've been doing already. So if you have any questions for either of us, we're happy to hear those this time.
I see that it said it was reviewed December 9th of 2029.
You know, let me to check that.
Maybe not.
Yeah,
Forecasting, how they're getting ahead of the policies now.
wonder who did that.
December.
I don't know.
Certainly, and then, clean that up when we get to the second. And the next policy for first reading is F-200, the bidding and quoting requirements. So, you may remember the Behemoth policy F-225 that we brought a couple of times because it got an addition in the middle, between first reading and second reading. That policy incorporated the F-200 bidding and quoting requirements. So, I'll bring this policy for removal. But, welcome any questions.
Everything inside of here is already encompassed in the other ones.
We don't lose anything, just. And our last one tonight, for first reading, is H-175 public records. This policy makes a change, moves the first paragraph was at the bottom of the policy, now it's in the top. Additionally, there's Indiana code that outlines reasons that our district can decline to respond to requests, and those include, we suspect that the requests be data scraping or phishing. If the district suspects that responding to the request electronically may jeopardize the security of the district's system or data, and the district finds that the requester is a party to pending or ongoing litigation. Further, Indiana code for the costs associated with filling a request and allowing, so the cost has changed, and then we prioritize requests from Indiana residents above maybe requesting the data. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about school board policy H-175.
This was a topic in this last session because schools are inundated with requests that are just, they're large, they're Some of them are repetitive and we don't know if it's a phishing, we're trying to figure that out. And so they're having us collect this data because I do believe that the Indiana Public Access Counselor wants to be able to give a recommendation to the legislatures to how we can move forward in protection of, the work that schools have to do to fulfill the requests. So I think this is a good um, in terms of these requests that take so much time.
Do those requests go through Mrs. Templeman's
They
office?
do. Because we have so much time in which we have to respond. Is it 5 days, 7 days?
You have to acknowledge the request received.
Within 7 days, just acknowledge. We have it. Take a look. Before we move on, I do want to mention in terms of the process for student due process rights, the board has asked for additional information because this is a matter, a public matter. You can bring that back as a second reading, and then we can come back as a third reading for you to vote. So there's no rush to get that done. Okay. Mhm. Great.
Thank you. Okay, continuing in new business, moving on to Panorama, Dr. Walters.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I'm happy to be the Panorama spokesperson. However, the efforts, input, and sort of output for this is definitely a full cabinet joint work and then joint celebration. So just to review, we have 3 years of baseline data, which is really exciting, actually, especially bringing in the IU along with the Lilly grant, really having other eyes taking a look at this data alongside the work that we're doing with NCEE. Those 3 years of baseline are really exciting. But just as a reminder, from in 23 and 24, and then 24 and 25, we did both a fall and spring survey administration of students. They take 2 surveys, their well-being survey and a classroom survey. Staff, 1 survey, teachers, 1 survey, and our caregivers, 1 survey. This last year, due to the Lilly grant, the evaluation through IU, and then NCEE, we also did a fall and spring administration, but we added a separate survey for our administrators. So we have that additional touch point. So what we pulled together for you today is 2 ways to kind of look at this data. Again, we have that 3 years of historical data, but our surveys also give our administrators really good insight into a year of work. So this first data point that we want to present is going to look at the fall 2005 survey of the stakeholder to the spring. So in the same calendar year, what work was done in that year. Just again, one way to look at that survey. So hopefully in a working session by design, we would definitely welcome any sort of conversation around it. But when we look at our student well-being, again, students take 2 surveys. So in our student well-being grades 3 through 6, we had a little bit to celebrate with our student supportive relationships throughout last year. Celebration with self-management. That social awareness piece, when you look at that sort of 1 percentage point change, that tells a little bit of a story. And then status quo and self-efficacy for the calendar year last year. Again, well-being, but grades 7 through 12, we've got a little movement in supportive relationships, social awareness, self-efficacy, and in that self-management. We all struggle with that sometimes, but that self-management. Fine there. There we go. Again, I mentioned before, they take 2 surveys. So this is the classroom survey for students, grade 3 through 6. It asks a few different questions. So in this one, really took a look at rigorous expectation, teacher-student relationships, sense of belonging, school climate, and then that safety sort of outlier again from the spring. I highlight this as one way to look at this, sort of in addition to the longitudinal way that we're going to look at it right after this, because these again is for 1 calendar year versus what growth might we have had from 2023 to 2026. So again, our administrators take a look at these and factor those into their long-range plans. Student classroom for grades 7 through 12. Again, this is the academic side of things. So not a lot of movement in a few places, a little bit up in rigorous, a little bit down in school climate for the calendar year. We presented, Dr. Suggs presented both times with her admin retreats in June and July. We had a lot to celebrate with our teachers, our teachers survey responses this year. You can see the list of topics that they are surveyed in their panorama experience. And then again, this is a snapshot from the fall to the spring. Lots to celebrate there from our teachers' reflection throughout last year.
You see the well-being. Yeah, and there was a lot that happened last year in terms of negotiations. I mean, it just was a tough year. And I mean, the other factors that it's hard to understand if they impact the surveys, but just, our culture, period, right? In our communities right now and all the things that families are dealing with could very well impact the well-being.
If you see all those positives going up and not so much negative,
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much disorientation. I mean, if that was up, I would be here. I would actually wonder why.
What would be a sample question in the well-being?
Sample question in the well-being.
Yeah, so each of these topics actually have a corresponding set of questions that allows Panorama to really norm around the holistic response. I will follow up with Dr. Suggs. Maybe we can get you the full survey for every stakeholder.
Yeah. Questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can share specifically on the well-being. When I got into that for the district, it was interesting because what they scored really high for the teachers and staff was the question about my work matters and my work is meaningful. Those were 95% and 93% respectively that marked those positively. What brought those scores down was the question when it asked, how often do you feel? And then there were several questions: frustrated at work, worried at work, stressed at work.
Yeah.
And so if
There
you
you go.
said,
Every day.
and it's the way that it codes it, if you said sometimes, that's a negative response. So, we're not necessarily even saying often, but if you said rarely or never, that would get the positive score. Sometimes in the middle is reflected as a negative response, not a positive response for those. So
Yeah.
I think that
None of us
shows a
are
little
values.
insight.
That is frustrating.
Yeah.
Like I talked about today.
Sometimes frustrated, sometimes stressed, worried.
And it'll win the spring. Say a lot.
Well, we timed it after spring break, hoping people were feeling really good.
No, there's still April.
Dang.
Right, oh my God.
Am I frustrated with I read or I learn checkpoint? Yeah.
Finals.
Yeah. Although it's relatively the same survey, we do ask our instructional staff, mainly those teachers, to click one link and our staff to click another link, because we recognize that some of these pieces might look different in terms of the role that you bring to the school.
So
So-
staff would represent our class tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But again, some celebrations in this past year when we look at fall to spring in those same topic bands.
School leadership, is that in the school or is that as a district leadership?
That's a good question.
Very specific.
Yeah, I would say that most taking it would point directly to their school administrative leadership. And last but certainly not least is our caregiver survey. It's really interesting with the other historical longitudinal data that we'll go to next. But obviously you can see fall to spring, what we're looking at there. We're able to, with a number of our surveys, well, Panorama is able to benchmark those against other Panorama districts throughout the country. So that's what you'll see there with those national benchmarks.
that 90%, which speaks to the parents' belief that the school is able to help their child and caregiver navigate barriers to engagement in the school to the extent that the school does. So that's a huge celebration for our caregivers to not only recognize, that support here in locally, but above the 90th percentile with all panorama schools is definitely a
And
celebration.
I would note a large proportion of our parents and caregivers feel like our schools are safe. It's important. Love to get that number up. That's a great percentage.
Interesting because the kids, their numbers went down for school safety and this one, kids are in the buildings.
So again, I mentioned one way to look at this is within one calendar year between those two surveys. I personally like the historic highlights a little better because it paints a different picture. So we looked at what that one touch point of teacher self-reflection, for example, from fall to spring. But what this story tells us is that teacher self-reflection from fall of 2023, when we first surveyed our teachers, and the drastic improvement, not from fall of 25, but from fall of 23 to fall of 26, that work is really, really seeing some benefits there for our teachers. Another one that we pay a lot of attention to, if you'll remember this graphic, we've shared as part of our Late Start Monday work and all of our professional development, that most impactful thing that teachers can have on the student learning experience is that collective teacher efficacy. And in our panorama historical representation of how our teachers view their self-efficacy, again, a really, really nice celebration from fall of 23 to spring of 26. And we talked in cabinet recently too, that largest, not from 69 to 74, but that 74 to 78 is quite literally the implementation of Late Start Monday. And so when we see that those legs continuing to grow, we're really excited to see that work.
We would expect that number based on the work we're doing and the plans ahead of us for those numbers to go up, even if it's hard, right? Self-efficacy says, I can teach our kids. The work I do every day makes a difference. And certainly, I'd be surprised if it.
Another thing to celebrate are how our students were creeping up on rigorous expectations. Sometimes this sort of survey response corresponds negatively with sort of that sense of well-being, or you ask students to do more rigor, that sometimes comes out in different ways. But I do think the power of high expectations in our classrooms for our students, and our students recognizing that, is another thing to celebrate. I mentioned this earlier, those barriers to engagement and the difference between last year, but we're really seeing that trend up from the beginning. So again, another celebration of that work. Historical highlights always come with historical opportunities as well. So taking a look, you guys mentioned earlier, this sense of well-being is definitely something through our panorama survey that our teachers are communicating. As Heather mentioned, the sort of relationship between, I know my work, I know I'm cared for and my work matters, but this is frustrating work. This is hard work. One thing specifically a Late Start Monday that we really want to start to also attack is this idea of feedback and coaching. So within the internal work that our teachers are doing amongst each other with that collective efficacy and collaboration, what is the system that is providing them some collective feedback, outside of? So our administrative staff, our coaching staff, et cetera. So we'll really pay attention to this one with the work with Late Start Monday in the next 2 years or so, because that is quite literally the focus of TEL. What does that coaching support look like? How do administrators provide that support for our teachers and as individuals and groups? So we'll hopefully be able to point to some successes there.
This is the one in a couple of concerned about feedback and coaching.
Absolutely.
Low. Well, in addition to that, something that is new that I kind of hit on this morning too, was how the staff is starting to gel in a way that is collaborative, and they are sharing best practices. They're gonna be into each other's classrooms. I really think when they take this survey in the future, that is part of the feedback that they've not experienced specifically before, right? As a system, as an expectation. So to your point, I would expect that this would go up because they're gonna get so much feedback.
This one was interesting too, because the highest score here was on how useful is the feedback in your teaching. So they found the feedback useful. But where they scored low was how often are you
Yes.
receiving feedback and how much feedback do you receive when
Yeah.
you're teaching?
It's this idea of what is feedback. It's not just the evaluation at the end of the year, right? It's the conversations with the coaches, it's conversations with your colleagues or your department chair. And, it's the planning that they do together.
I'm sure you consider feedback.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
they're getting
that's right.
feedback
Just
and not
principle.
recognizing it as feedback.
That's exactly right? This conversation, yeah, defining what feedback is. And I think her what she just told us would point to that.
Dr. Walden, what is the expectation is, I guess, but what is the percentage of surveys completed versus what's put out?
Well, you take me to one of my next areas of growth. So I'll actually go back and highlight something that just in our most recent call, we identified. We've talked about it each sort of year, but in our most recent call, that's going to be one of the things that we really pay attention to this year, which is survey completion rate. Our goal historically has been 80% of staff, 80% of students, 20% of caregivers. Caregivers is kind of hard to measure because we have multiple caregivers in the home. And we also have multiple siblings that might be attached to one caregiver, but I think we can generally get a pretty good idea. But as you can see on the top of each of these, we're well aware of how many responses. We have a different graphic that's easier to see on that response rate. Right now, we have highlights. We have a number of schools that hit that 80-80 every single time. And this year, we've shared best practices, and we'll really hone in on those because we have captive audiences with our students and our staff. There's no reason why we shouldn't be hitting 80% with that group. So that is one of the things that we want to pay attention to. We have not yet hit 80-80-20 above all, but we've gotten very close and definitely escalated each year with our students and staff. Last year we did incentives too. I'm hoping my Costco gift card, it gets a lot of online attention because we put that out there, but we'll look to do more incentives for our caregivers too, hoping to just generate some of that interest in there.
And I would say when you look at that grades 3 through 6, we have approximately 1,000 students in each grade level. So about 4,000 students, and we have 3,780. But again, captive audience, like they're taking it as a class in school.
And I'll compare that too to your point with grade 7 through 12, where I think K through 6 or 3 through 6 is a different captive audience than 7 through 12, but there's still absolutely no reason we should definitely be able to capture those kids.
12 definitely a lot more.
Yeah.
Less
Yeah.
active, if you will.
But here, I'll just scroll through these briefly in case you didn't notice these before. That was our well-being responses. And again, these surveys aren't designed to be taken in the same sitting for the students. That would be a little bit long for them to do. So that's why we sometimes see a difference between the student well-being and the student classroom on those response rates, because the student might have been absent the next time. But those are our students. We got 640 of our almost, what would you say, Kyle? 1,000 teachers, 306 of our similar 1,000 staff. And then again, this one being really different, but to your point, Mr. Gordon, we're going to look at this in a moment with a change that we're implementing this year to help our families to kind of engage them a little bit differently.
Parent permission that has to be gained for that, nothing that triggers that.
The law, no. The parent permission that we run through on any of the other surveys, but Panorama, yeah. So again, to this question, one thing we're looking at this coming year, we'll continue that fall and spring survey administration with our student, staff, teachers, and administrators. But Dr. Suggs has decided this year for our caregivers specifically, we think that it might benefit our caregivers to have a status report that would be at the, put out associated with historical panorama data and sort of the moves and shifts that the district has done because of that feedback. So that will accompany the surveys for the staff, students, teachers, and administrators in the fall. And we'll end up only administering a spring survey for our parents this year. So we get that one touch point of data associated with, here's the information that we did with last year's data, or in this case, the last 3 years data. Now we really want to hear what you felt, how you felt about this year. And that's our panorama update.
And does that go out to the caregivers via email, via Parent Square?
It's a 2-week cadence. Janine does a really good job of kind of leading up to it and then reminders to let people know. We track response rates for staff and students every 3 days or so, and we'll share with our administrators, here's where you're at with students, here's where you're at with staff. You know, you need a final push to get over that 80% or so.
Just a point of clarification on the permissions. We don't ask parents for permission, but we are required to publish it on the website, and we do notify them and give them an option to review it, and if they want to opt out, they can.
Yes, thank you. It doesn't hit the sexual or the demographic things, but thank you, Janine. We definitely allow them to opt out.
Dr. Walter, should I ask a quick question? Of course. Within the panorama, our students are mobile, they move around. How much of an impact does that have, like fall to spring? Are we testing the same kids in the fall as we are in the spring? I guess not. And that's what I'm wondering, are we seeing differences with the mobility rate?
I don't know offhand our mobility rate within the year. I would guess that that's less than our mobility rate maybe from year to year.
Okay.
But certainly something we could look at. I think we'll have a really good snapshot, maybe not necessarily, though I think we could attach this to Panorama, but with accountability this year, we will have for the first time student specific information. And so for each student, we will have whether they were sort of tied to the school for 162 days or whatever it is, or whether they remained in the district but might not have been tied to a school. So at some point, I think, especially in the age of AI, we could probably correlate that data. Yeah.
I just wondered if it made a difference.
Yeah.
It's not just good with AI. She did something amazing this morning. But
I see that video. That's so different.
Thank you, Dr. Walter.
Thank you.
Board, before we move on, just a point of emphasis and clarification. We are recording this evening's meeting for information to be simulcast and archived. As we discuss school safety plans, we may encounter some sensitive content. Our conversation should be not withholding, but intentionally vague. We should not discuss anything specific regarding rendezvous points, reunification sites, emergency codes, or any specifics related to a specific school safety plan. And after tonight's meeting, I believe we need to turn the example safety plans back into Dr. Samuel. Being said, Dr. Samuel, school safety plans.
Thank you, Mr. President. That is all 100% correct, and I do appreciate you mentioning that before we begin here. So have, I think, a pretty quick run through here. There are a few updates, a few changes from what you have seen in the past. So we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about how we arrived at the decision to make those changes, where the information that eventually was used to update our safety plans was found, and then, of course, look at a couple examples, as you indicated, to be sure that the board has that information. So as we begin, first, just some very basics. This is a little bit of information we shared with administrators at the top there, just regarding the timeline. But what ends up happening, these are under Indiana code required to be presented to the board. There is no action required. And so they're always on this meeting, which when it coincides with the very first day of school, as actually very convenient for these purposes. Tomorrow, then, I will take a PDF for each school's safety plan and upload it into Navigate 360 emergency management software, which I will display on the board to just share with the board a little bit toward the end of the presentation. The last little bullet there regarding the Navigate 360 template, we'll talk about more as we get through the rest of the slides as well. But as I mentioned, and what you have in front of you, the large part of our work today will be reviewing some of the changes in terminology that we will be instituting here with safety plans this year. And so contextually, I think it's valuable to think about how we arrived at the need for a change. So we had been meeting with the district safety committee throughout the spring semester last year and had looked at this terminology, which was part of the Indiana School Safety Specialist training. It's how I became familiar with it. And as fate would have it, certainly not luck, we had some incidents in our schools where our terminology, previous terminology of external lockdown and internal lockdown created some confusion. And we got, to Dr. Suggs' credit, she went and visited, talked with those teachers, and we're able to hear some very real feedback about just challenges that presented. And so luckily, that principal was at the safety committee meetings, and he was able to say, we're already investigating this new terminology. I do anticipate that changing for the next school year. So it was a really concrete example of how this can better serve our staff, students, and community with that. So the other piece to that was really the reason that I think the conversation was initiated in the first place is I think our culture has been in the district that there's a hesitancy to utilize the school safety plan, that in some instances you don't want to overreact. And one of the things that we talked about with that committee is the plan and these protocols are in place for a reason, to keep our students safe. And you're never, we're always going to debrief, but we would always prefer that you err on the side of caution using one of these protocols than the opposite of that. And so the first example of terminology that you see here is completely new. It's a term that we haven't used previously. It's called HOLD. And so, I can think of a handful of times as a principal where, for example, a student is having a seizure in a hallway. And in order to protect the integrity of that student and allow for medical personnel or our nurse to get there as efficiently as possible, we could have initiated a hold and the hallways would have remained clear. Our staff and students then become accustomed to, we have a safety plan, we're going to use it. It's not an emergency necessarily for me to cause stress or heartache or real concern. I just know that the school is taking care of something for one of my classmates. And so that is a completely new one, but I do think will probably be the one that's used most frequently by our schools as we look at these terminology changes. The second one is called secure. And you can see that this document outlines what the PA system announcement would be, then what terminology it is replacing, and a little bit of guidance. So this was provided to principals, administrators, and then in some way is included in their school safety plan this school year for the change. But secure is replacing our previous terminology of external lockdown. And that is what we got into when we had an incident in the spring. Was there was an announcement made beginning of the day, students are still in the hallway for arrival, car rider line still going on, hard to hear the announcement. All anybody heard was lockdown. And so there were different teachers implementing different parts of our safety plan. That's just not something that we want to have. So replacing external lockdown with secure provides a very clear action. We're going to continue with instruction, but we're going to secure the classroom. We're going to close the door and lock it. It communicates that the threat is outside of the school building. not inside of the school building at that time and allows instruction to continue. So,
PA announcement be made.
yeah, so that
Will
really,
alleviate the not hearing.
absolutely, that would be the directive to make the announcement twice.
Okay.
And I think that's another piece that Dr. Harvey and I have talked about. There were a couple places where we've looked at volume, we've looked at connections within the PA system. But to your point, no system is sure. And so definitely need to do our due diligence and ensure that it's being implemented. Most of the time in the school setting, what that looks like are administrators and custodians checking our exterior doors, making sure that they're all secure. And that while they're doing that, they're also able to walk through the hallways and confirm that that's what's happening. That's absolutely important. The next one, lockdown, replacing internal lockdown. Again, that's the one, what you would see if there was an active threat inside of the school building. So could be an angry parent that's left the office. It could be somebody that they're concerned maybe is trying to do harm to staff or students. But again, I think an example where hope that we've kind of cleaned that up and provided some clear delineation between terminology. Evacuate is pretty straightforward. Many times that's initiated by the fire alarms, but if, for instance, we had a weather emergency where we were utilizing the next term, which is shelter, and there was perhaps some structural damage to the school, then we would come on the PA and or walk the hallways and say, we need to evacuate now while the fire department assesses or an engineering team assesses the structural viability of this facility moving forward. I spoiled the last one, but it is shelter. So earthquakes, tornadoes, severe weather. Again, you get the idea.
These posted throughout the buildings to where teachers have an opportunity to. I've been busy and I truly forgot what this one means or something like that.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at that and then we'll take.
Sorry if I'm
No, it's
getting.
great. It's a great question. So I'll start with this. The terminology comes from the I Love You Guys Foundation, started by the father of, unfortunately, a young lady in Colorado that was killed in a school shooting. The last text he had from his daughter just said, I love you guys. And so that's the name of the foundation. So he has committed and speaks at the school safety specialist training every year in Indiana, and also spoke at a behavioral threat assessment training that myself and Chief Pumershine and a few administrators went to this past winter as well. But I show this just to say there are a lot of great resources. It is it's been around for quite some time. It is a well-vetted system that I think we can feel really confident about as we transition to this terminology. So the resources then, what we have asked our teachers to do is post this document in their classrooms. And so that's going to provide that reminder of that terminology. We used to have flip charts is what we call them. And people still ask for those. Janine every year has to, at some point comes to me and says, I'm getting a request for these. Can you respond to this school and let them know why that's not a good practice? But great resource. Again, I think simplifies the process, makes it very visual and easy to understand. The other thing that we would have for teachers is this other document here that they would have as part of their safety plan documents, their materials that they would grab as they leave the classroom. It also outlines it. I think it would be prudent in the guidance is to kind of have it close to your desk in case you're on the phone or at your computer to grab, and then of course to indicate if there was a need for help, whether you are in your classroom or whether we have evacuated the school setting at that point in time. So questions on any of that as before we move on to any other parts of the presentation? going to skip to the safety plan review. We'll come back. I don't want to get too far out of order here, but I think what you'll see at the start of those documents is a couple things, that there should be a reference to these changes in terminology since they are new. We provided a template to each school that updated all the terminology so that our school leaders just had to copy and paste those specific portions that were highlighted in yellow to replace the corresponding part in the previous plan. And then many of our school leaders elected to keep those in yellow to call them out for teachers and school personnel as this transition occurred. So a little bit different approach. The one school decided to really kind of copy that matrix that we reviewed and leave it in there in that manner. The other school elected to condense that a little bit. I think probably adapt it to what their teachers are more accustomed to hearing. I think both approaches are good and certainly appropriate.
One of the things I know that during an emergency, someone's not gonna be flipping through necessarily and reading through this, but I also did notice that your prefixes aren't all the same. So some we have the area code of 317 and some you don't. And in an emergency, people need to know what they're supposed to be dialing. You know, we had when 911 first came out, remember it was 911 and people in emergencies couldn't find the 11. So making sure, so we went back to 911, make sure we say that. So making sure that all that is the same, that you have 317 on probably is a good idea. Again, not that the principal's gonna be flipping through and whoever's in charge of the time will be, but it's good practice to have. Yeah, I think that's really good, those changes. So much clearer. You can still take class rosters with us also.
There is some capabilities within Navigate, but we're taking more steps every year to utilize those features. All right, let's look at just a couple other things. I mentioned the Navigate emergency management system. I suspect it may have been a while if you've seen this, since you have seen it, and they're always doing some updates to this. One of the updates I was no, we're not. school resource officers, and then the next group that we're preparing to roll out the training to is school counselors, and that will kind of complete those teams for the district across elementary and secondary level. I think that is it, unless there are further questions.
Not specifically related to the school safety plan, but can you give us a kind of a Cliff's Notes update on how many of our schools have been outfitted with secure entryways, and are we still utilizing the mobile metal detection at random access points at the secondaries?
So that both excellent questions. The 3M film we do have at all of our entries, and so it is. I mean, just a quick review of that. It's not a bulletproof film, but it is going to prevent entry. That in the video that they advertise the product for, somebody comes with an axe trying to get through glass that has that film applied, and it takes them, I want to say, like 5 minutes to gain entry through that. So as we've talked about previously, really what the safety plan is about is, of course, doing all the things that will keep our community as safe as possible. But if you really boil it down, it's all about buying time. About buying time for our resource officers and law enforcement to be able to respond before any harm comes to people within our schools. So absolutely. In some places, we've extended that. That's more rare, but those glass vestibule entries in front of our schools do all have that. The the weapons detection systems that we utilize, that's also a point of emphasis. And I know, again, just without getting too specific, there are articulated plans and calendars for when those will occur across our secondary schools. So Lyndhurst and Chapel Hill have one set of those systems that they're able to utilize. The high school has in total 6. We can obviously move those around different places. That includes the 9th grade center. They have their own set as well. So one of those things that we know is critical, and of course we can ramp up if there's a specific concern within the school community as well.
I think our future planning is to be able to, I wouldn't say improve, but certainly provide additional security, safety and security, should the funds be available to do that. There's certainly a plan in place.
We have to turn into the state still, or whatever it turned into, how many drills we have each year, each school, by school. How's that on there?
And Navigate actually has a really nice collection mechanism now. So all administrators, they schedule their drills in Navigate, and then they go in and indicate that those have been completed. And it also has a place to add notes for who was there, what they did, whether they kind of, for lack of a better term, threw any wrenches into the response that staff.
The fire marshal still makes a trip to our building.
Oh, yeah.
And compliant. Yep.
We did have a school that had a complete clean bill of health from the fire marshal just last week, and that is a credit to the administrative team, the custodial team,
What school was that?
and I believe it was Roby. So really
Huge.
They're all doing really well with it, but that was like I know Mr. Hendricks, when he got that letter back, he was immediately sent it to the principal and copying Dave Erickson and I, and was ecstatic that we had achieved such a status. It's awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
I know this is a little different than what we're talking about, but I know Laura and Mr. Wilson have both said that just conflicts between students in the hallway has been down a lot. And I know for students, when we talk about school safety, that's a big part of how you feel how safe your school is. And so I haven't had a chance to hear directly from, other, secondary schools, but that was definitely encouraging to hear that they were just so excited about how student behavior has improved so much over the last year.
This spring, I was in the high school quite a bit, and that was one of the things that I noted and talked to the administrative staff about. It is noticeable. I'm in the hallways when they're, during lunchtime, passing periods. That is correct. Students are polite. They, it's not loud. And the administrator shared that they had seen this improvement over time. I would like to think that was the place we were pre-COVID, and we're getting back to that place again. But it's a pleasant experience to go through our secondary school.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel.
Thank you.
Moving on, Dr. Stokes, do you have any board information or comments?
I've got a couple things. I thought opening day went well. I'm getting lots of feedback. Getting lots of great feedback, most of it really funny. And I've enjoyed that and tried to make sure I responded to everyone today. But I thought it was a really good day. The focus was really to help us understand as a staff, and everyone, that we're moving in a particular way. We're on a path together. I really wanted to emphasize this idea of leadership, and that everyone is responsible for that. And we need, you just can't sit in the back seat and take direction. And you really have to be an active participant. And that's a great segue into our book. If you want to go ahead and pass those down. This book is the one that, as an administrative team, not just principals and assistant principals, but all of us are reading together, and we meet quarterly with the whole team, and they're broken up into groups and they present the chapters. So we've heard from the intro, chapter 1, chapter 2. The bar is set really high. They did a phenomenal job. And so again, the purpose in studying this together is to really bring us together and talk about what it means to build a culture of excellence. What does that really mean? What does that mean for Wayne? And taking a closer look at the systems. And I've said this several times to cabinet. If it doesn't fit the system, we're not doing it, right? It's that taking things off the plate that just don't belong there. And some of us doing, because I like this part of it and I don't want to do this part, and those kinds of things. Just kind of bringing our arms around all of that. So that's exciting work. I hope you enjoy the book. It's really a good read. Students arrive on Wednesday. They're coming, ready or not. I alerted you that Skyward was a nationwide outage. And it is causing all kinds of havoc from the country. It certainly has put a strain on what we're doing here. So when it was down for 6 days, which was just a couple days ago, we couldn't do any scheduling. We couldn't enroll anyone. It just stopped breathing. And we're trying to play catch up. We've got great staff who are coming in after hours, coming in on weekends. We have folks that don't typically do enrollment that are pitching in. So all facets of the district are trying to help to get everyone. Unfortunately, there are going to be some students that will not be able to start on the first day. I think I also mentioned we had 300 that got stalled. Well, then 100 showed up today. Now that's a great problem to have, because we really want students and families to be here who want to be in Wayne. But it just is causing a backlog. And so we're working on a communication that will go directly to those parents who have applied, to let them know what the holdup is. Please wait for an email from us, which we're hoping the delay is, not more than a couple of days max. That's the goal. And once they get that email, then they're able to get in Parent Square. They'll know what teacher and what time they need to be at school and what their bus route is.
Does that mean a secondary or elementary school?
Oh, it's K-12. We have a lot of littles that showed up, the last minute.
Maybe an awful. Obviously, we just took enrollment away from the schools from the enrollment secretaries. Are the old enrollment secretaries helping?
They sure are.
Because obviously they have the know-how and the ability. to do
Exactly.
so.
Right.
So
Yeah. Great question. Absolutely. Everyone's pitching it.
Are we seeing enrollment going up, Betty? Hard to tell.
If we are at 15,000 at the start of school, we've met our goal. So we're inching closer and closer to that. You know, we've got to clean the data, right? Who shows up? You know, that's right. That's exactly right. So we certainly will keep you informed. Right now, 14,772 or something.
Does that include our 400 that have been enrolled yet?
No. Right. Yeah. So we're trending the way we want to be trending right now.
With the BDU, and they got A through J schedules done, but those W's lines.
Okay.
you are. I could give you that, man.
You didn't name drop yourself?
Fine.
Like, I know a guy. You know who I?
As we're talking about enrollment, we extended enrollment for those who, after June 4th, they continue to apply. We said we would put you on a waiting list. And so when did we cut that off? June, it was late June, right before break.
June 4th, and the waiting list would have been
The ones we got back.
2.5 weeks ago.
Okay. And we had 70.
Eventually, no, the waiting list, when we audited, there were duplicate application. There were out of districts that had already been denied that applied again. So I think we ended up with around 20.
You have our counterparts surrounding the school district do that in the second semester of athletics. So they open it back up in case there's any movement. That's the game we're playing. Right? So we're almost forced to do that. If we don't open it up, potential students go, we will. That's exactly right. And we will accept their siblings. The students who decide, so that'll be 7 through 12, that movement will happen. So we'll monitor that, keep you informed of what that looks like.
Elementary age siblings as well.
Yeah, they have siblings, absolutely. Yep. Stairwell at Ben Davis High School, you might have noticed that that main stairwell going up to the second floor, that's right in front of the cafeteria. We're still waiting on parts of that, mostly the railings. And so we boxed that off. I thought it looked okay. It's not the best the solution. We'd love to have had the rails, but I think it's the best solution in terms of safety. And so we're hoping to have that project done at the end of the semester.
All break is,
Oh,
so all contingent upon the railings arriving
on time.
in a timeline that will allow that.
Yeah, that would be the goal. So great. In fact,
Yeah.
We've been convinced that
something else, I don't know if you noticed, we're all aware that the cell phone policy will go into effect. No cell phones from the start of school to the end of the school day. We've sent out several notices to parents. We'll continue to do that through Parent Square and our graphics along with that. In the high school, where this will probably be a shock and hard for students because they have been able to use them between classes, passing periods, and at lunch. Remember, our elementaries and our middle schools have not had their phones during the day. This is not good for them. So grades 9 through 12, it's going to be a little bit of a shock. But at the high school, they have these no cell phone signs. So I know, our teaching staff, they've expressed concern of, what's this gonna be like? Are we gonna have to police this? Are kids gonna push back? I would say, sure. In the beginning, some will, most won't. They know this is happening. If you remember, I visited all the secondary schools and said, this is a real thing. Like, this is going to happen. So, we'll be watchful. We certainly will support, administration and our teachers as we, and parents. I think there are gonna be some parents that might struggle with it. So, just a couple projects that we're finishing up, ESCC, Garden City. I haven't been over yet, but I am this week. I've heard it looks beautiful. So we're so happy and excited for them. We have, just a couple of projects, roads and Roby, that are just being spruced up. And it'll happen at fall break. So not complete carpet, replacement, but places where we need paint, we just want facilities to be maintained. So that'll be happening at those two buildings. We're gonna start our straight A events. I understand this is my first time doing this. If it's raining, we're gonna be outside. I saw that some of you accepted, we may be out there in the rain. If it's hot, we're still gonna be out there. But that starts August the 4th. And then we cannot let this night go by without singing happy birthday to Mr. Gordon.
It's long past.
It was not long,
Long
it was
past.
Friday.
It's long
It
past.
was just Friday, all right? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. And then the one last thing is that we are passing these out at back to school nights. So that started tonight, correct me? Started tonight. And so I'll leave these here this way so you don't poke yourself. If you would like one for your yard, please, please, please take one. If you know a neighbor who would love to put this in their yard, please take one.
And then you can go there tomorrow.
So now. All right, that was it, Mr. President.
Dr. Suggs, we all know comparison is the thief of joy, so I'm not gonna draw any comparisons, but I will say in one capacity or another, this is my 15th opening day. And this morning was truly spectacular. In my recollection, it's the first time that there's been a focus on our students' talent, and that was really special. Kudos to you and the entire group that I know it took to put that together. So well done.
Thank you, Dr. Harvey's team, phenomenal to make it happen so seamlessly. So appreciate it.
Board, Mrs. O'Day Marcotte and I had a conversation with a very tenured teacher this morning. The message was very clear. Mrs. O'Day Marcotte, please interject if I missed anything, but I believe that our staff fully supports and is dedicated to helping our community see the value in passing this referendum. But there is a clear expectation for this to be connected to contract negotiations.
Still some confusion, I think, also about change in increment all those years ago. Able to say that wasn't us, right? So we love to continue to get raises.
Yeah.
Also, in a pigeonhole of some years, there's a group of, at least I know for us, there's a group in there
Crunched up.
that some after them make more just because of what happened in that time frame. So. That's about us all.
Any additional comments or information this evening? We have a motion to adjourn. A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. We're adjourned at 7:56.